Welcome. This is Win the City Wisdom produced by New Acropolis. New Acropolis is a school and community dedicated to living philosophy that is connected to life. My name is Yadira, and I'm a student and volunteer at New Acropolis, and with me here is Gilad Sommer, teacher and director of New Acropolis Chicago. Thank you for joining us today. And today, we would like to talk about a very important topic in our everyday life, which is decision making, and how a philosophical approach can help us make decisions, better and with more clarity. We all need to make many decisions every day, and we're not sure we're making the right choice. So let's take a look at this clip that we have, and we can continue talking about it.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
So great movie, The Matrix, and a very dramatic decision. Yes, I agree, Yadira. I think that decision making is a very important topic. And I think philosophy can give us very good keys to work with that decision process.
Yes, so let's dive in. What type of decisions do you think we struggle the most nowadays?
Well, I think the decisions we struggle the most with today are not very different than the ones people struggled with throughout history, right? So we have these big decisions of, where to work, relationships, and where to live, and so on. These kind of big decisions, right?
Yeah, like what workplace should I choose? Where should I live? Should I stay or should I go?
Right.
Do you remember that song?
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that song. Yeah, the 80s, The Clash, right?
Yeah, so they were very, very wise back then.
Right.
I mean, and that's quite a decision in life, right?
Should I stay or should I go, right? Should I stay in that relationship? Should I leave that place? That's a big decision. But I think that sometimes we tend to underestimate the small decisions in life. We talk a lot about, when we think about decision making, we talk a lot about the big decisions. Should I stay or should I go? But there are these small decisions that we take every day that affect the big decision. So it's not just about should I stay or should I go, but what should I do when I stay? How should I act? And these are things that we forget.
Like how do I speak with my coworkers, how I should relate to them,
Right.
how do I start my day, right? If I just wake up and watch the news, or maybe I take some time to a few minutes in bed,
Right.
and then take time to stretch.
Right, exactly. So we talk about should I stay or should I go, but how do I interact with my partner on an everyday basis? If I don't do that right, I will get to that that decision of should I stay or should I go. So we have to think not just about those big those big decisions, but really also about those everyday decisions. Yeah.
So like the small decisions, you're saying to stop the autopilot and be more intentional with those small decisions.
Right, because sometimes they're not even decisions. Sometimes they're just automatic. So
yes.
I walk into the workplace with my head stuck in the phone, and I don't even notice my coworker may be in distress. I don't even say hi. But I didn't make that decision. I didn't think, should I go in with my head stuck in the phone? I usually just do it automatically because it's an unconscious decision. So we have to make it into a decision by putting our attention into it.
So these are like the small habits that we just follow and we don't even think about them. Like getting coffee in the first thing in the morning.
Right.
Did I ever stop and think, do I really want this coffee or not? But how this is connected to decision making?
Well, it's part of decision making. We have to make it into decision making because it's usually not decision making. It's usually automatic. So if we put more awareness into our everyday automatic unconscious actions, we can turn something that was automatic into a decision, and that will also affect the way we live our lives and will affect the way we live the big decisions that we took.
Okay.
Yeah?
So also would like to shed some light on the situation that we are aware that we have to make a decision, but it might be a difficult situation or maybe high stakes are on the table.
Right.
And it's okay to spend some time weighing some options or possible outcomes, but we really have to avoid overthinking.
Right.
And we have another clip, a very funny one, that speaks about overthinking.
We have so many big choices to make. Let's start small. Do you want to use a dry erase board or the regular pen and paper? Just pick.
Chitty, just pick. Come on, Chitty, pick someone. Don't pressure me, Uzo. I have to consider all the factors. Athletic strategies, the fragile egos of my classmates, and gender politics. Should I pick a girl as a gesture towards women's equality? Or is that pandering? Or do I think it's pandering because of my limited male point of view? I'm vexed, Uzo, vexed. You're always vexed. Just pick. Okay.
Be easier to sort out the issue of dry erase versus paper.
So here we are, we are talking about those decisions, like you mentioned, that we're conscious that we need to make a decision, and we're overthinking. We just can't take the decision, right? And why do you think we sort of overthink, like Chidi, in the good place?
I think overthinking comes from a place of fear. So the fear of making a mistake.
Right. We are afraid of making mistakes, absolutely.
And we just have to accept there as a fact. If we spend 1,000 hours, doing some research, reading reviews, plotting different scenarios in our mind, just things can go wrong.
Right.
That's the nature of making a decision. So it's like the saying, don't take a rose if you can handle its thorns.
Right.
It's just, go together.
It's part of it. So here's the thing. When we need to make a decision, it's exactly because we don't know what's the right choice. Because if we know exactly the right choice, usually we just take the right choice. But we have to make a decision when, let's say, it's 50-50, it's 70-30, we're not sure. Yeah. So already ingrained inside the decision-making process is the fact that it's possible that we're going to make a mistake, right?
Yeah, we are kind of blindfolded when we make a decision, and it's a fact that we have to accept. So we can take time to review what options do we have, but there is really no certainty. It's an informed bet, but it's a bet still.
Right. And there's one thing we have to learn is to accept that we're going to make mistakes and to accept making mistakes. It's not a problem. The problem is that we are afraid of, first of all, how people will judge us. So we think, oh, if I'll make this mistake, what this person will say, what that person will say, how would they look at me? They'll think I'm an idiot or something like that. Right, and worse than that, because the reality is that most people don't think about us, let's be honest, we are the ones who judge ourselves the worst.
Yes,
we are.
yes.
And we are afraid of that. We're afraid of making mistakes and then the regret that will follow that, the judgment, the self-judgment, right?
Yeah, I agree. And, this reminds me of an interview I read a while ago. It was a very renowned innovator. She shared how her father, like during dinner, every night, would ask what type of mistakes she made that day at school. So the goal wasn't, of course, to scold her, but to create a safe space, during dinner time for reflection and for growth. So mistakes in that household were encouraged, even celebrated, but not the mistake itself,
Right.
but the learning that comes from it. So the wisdom they gain as a family because they were processing that, that mistake together.
I think that's a great approach to parenthood and to education in general, right? And we don't have to be, in a way, parents to do that because we're all going through a process of education where we are educating ourselves. So we can do that with ourselves. We don't have to do that with children.
Yeah, if we didn't have, we weren't lucky to have that experience, but nowadays we can be our own, children and our own parents.
Right. And this is, one way of doing that comes to mind is, let's say at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, you just go back over your day and think, okay, what mistakes did I make today? Because if you become conscious of your mistakes, then you can also not repeat them. If you become conscious, if you think about them, you can tell yourself, you know what, I won't do this again because I now think about it and it was a mistake. This actually reminds me of the Meditations of Marcus Aurelius.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sure our audience heard about that. So Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor and philosopher, probably the most famous philosopher today, very popular as a Stoic philosopher. And he wrote this book called Meditations, which actually was a kind of early type of journaling. He would be in the battlefield and in the camp, in the tent, and he would write all kinds of ideas at the end of the day. And you see in his writings, he's like telling himself, don't do that again. This is a mistake. You should do better. I think it's a great example of how we can learn from our own experience, how we can turn our experience into a learning experience, into something that we can learn from.
Yeah, this is a good example of personal accountability. And there is something else I like to highlight. So sharing mistakes, reflections with others, creates also this environment where mistakes are welcoming. So it's a nurturing environment. And also you open the door for other people to also share their experiences, and we can all benefit from this.
Right.
And sharing these mistakes, it's also very powerful because it can lead us to, to stronger connections, to be humble, to be more empathetic, and even to innovation, right? So who would have thought? Mistakes are good.
I wish it would have been that easy. I wish it would have been that easy to share your mistakes with others, to make connections that were... But we know that usually we get quite defensive when it comes to our mistakes, right? When someone comes to us and points out a mistake, we usually don't welcome them with open arms. Oh, thank you, sir, for pointing out that mistake. It helps me improve. Usually what happens is that we become very defensive, sometimes very aggressive if someone points out a mistake. And that's a problem. That doesn't allow us to sort of work with our imperfections, with our errors, right?
Yeah, because, accountability is not easy. Personal accountability, not easy at all.
Right.
So how do you think we can avoid getting defensive?
I think a certain degree of separation or detachment from ourselves in a way is very important. That means we have to detach a little bit from our personality. So if I identify with my faults, if I think I am this character trait that I have, then obviously if someone is pointing out that thing, I'm going to feel offended because I am that thing. So let's say I tend to be angry. I have an inclination to anger. So if I'm identifying with that anger, anything that will talk about or point that anger out will be very I will feel very defensive because of that. Probably you have that experience where you get angry and someone tells you, don't be angry. And it always helps. Immediately it stops the anger.
Yeah, that's a magic
magic word. So if we're able to create separation, detachment from our anger, maybe we can say, okay, it's not me. I'm not my anger. I can look at my anger and I can make a decision here. I can make a choice. What do I want to do with that anger? If I identify with my anger, I can't do it. It's just going to drive me around. But if I don't identify with it, if I can look back and see, okay, I'm angry right now. What can I do about it? Maybe I can take a break, take a breather, not to react to that anger, right?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating concept to have this, the wiser version of yourself in the regular one, right? So it's like the constant interaction between these two parts of yourself. And also you mentioned our personality. I know in Acropolis, we study this concept a little bit different. Can you tell us more about personality?
Sure. So the word personality comes from the Latin persona, which basically means mask. That's the mask that the Roman actors would wear in the theater. And this sort of says, okay, the personality that we have, it's actually not us. It's a mask that we are wearing. So your emotions, your thoughts, your body, and we want to recognize that it's a mask, right?
Okay.
That it's not who we are. Yeah, and there's an actor that is using this mask, this persona. Basically, that's the idea of the personality. Yeah?
Okay. So when we talk about decision making, we have to be aware of who's pulling the strings, right? So is it your personality or your authentic self? I like to picture it this way. I imagine, like, for example, my personality and my authentic self are in the same car, right? If I have to, who's driving the car? If my personality is driving the car, maybe she would take me to every ice cream shop in Chicago, which that'd be very wise to do, right? Yeah. But I also have to understand I'm a human. And I will make some mistakes. Yeah. And sometimes maybe, my personality would drive, and some others, my authentic self would drive. Yeah. But it's okay, and to have permission to make mistakes, but also be aware that I always have a choice.
Right.
Right.
The ideal is that the authentic self, or the higher self, as we call it, as many traditions actually called it, should be the one driving the car.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's okay if the authentic self takes the personality to a drive and brings it to an ice cream shop and say, okay, today you can get it.
Just one scoop.
One scoop. Or one. So it's okay. It's okay to let ourselves be who we are. But I think the authentic self should be the one driving. Now, another idea we didn't talk about. I mean, we spoke about the fear of making mistakes, and we said it's okay to be afraid of making mistakes, but it's okay also to make mistakes. But we have to do something with those mistakes, not just to make them, because that doesn't make sense. We want also to learn from our mistakes, right? And here there's another important concept, which is to use our memory. And when I say memory, I don't mean just the memory we use to memorize facts in school. Books and so on. Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about the memory that is related to attention, the memory of remembering, okay, what I did today, memory of our mistakes, memory of our actions, so we can learn from our mistakes. Otherwise, we're just going to repeat it again and again. So there's this story we like to tell in the school. This guy walks into a street, falls down a pit, shouts, help me, help me. And some people come, they throw down a rope, and he climbs up, and he gets out of the pit. Okay, the next day, goes again in the same street, falls down again in the same pit. Oh my God. Help me, help me. The people think he's a bit crazy, but anyway, they send down the rope. He goes back up. Okay, next day again, he goes down the same street, but now he's wiser. Why? Because he brought a rope. So he knows he's going to make the mistake, but he's ready for that. So he falls down the pit. Now uses his own rope. He doesn't need to shout, help me, help me. Throws his own rope up there. He climbs back up. The next day, he manages to skirt the pit. And then the following day, the last day, he just walks on a different road. So this is a story that tells us, the nature of human experience, because we usually don't make a mistake once. We usually make it again. Sometimes you probably had that experience, right? You're heading into the mistake. You see the mistake, and yet you do it anyway,
yes,
right?
Yes.
But at least you are more conscious, because before you used to make the mistake and didn't even know that, right?
And I like that. We know that we're gonna make some mistakes, but we have to take the time to reflect.
Right.
So stay in that place a little longer. Right. In that sense of, I made a mistake, right? But without the judgment. So it's like being comfortable with that feeling, with the aftermath of making a mistake. Right. And there is something else I like to consider as too. So when we are overthinking and not making a decision, there is, another player that we have to take into consideration. If we don't make that decision, someone will make for us. Right. So here we have the time. Right.
I do agree with that. So that's another factor we need to take into account. We are living in the dimension of time and space, right? So it's not like we can wait until the end of the universe to make the mistake and nothing to make a decision and nothing is going to happen, right? So long as we are waiting, we're not making the decision, time is passing. So let's say, take the most concrete, basic example. So let's say I'm not sure I want to travel, but I'm not sure if I want to travel. I want to travel, but I'm afraid to travel. I want to travel, I'm not sure I can afford traveling.
I don't have enough vacation time.
I don't have enough
PTO.
vacation time. So I wait and I wait and I wait, and then, the vacation time comes and I didn't order the ticket, and now it's too late. So if I don't make the decision in time, what's going to happen is that time is going to make the decision for us.
Yeah, and if we let the time decide for us, so we will be missing the learning opportunity there.
Because there's no accountability.
Yeah, no accountability, and then you are missing that opportunity.
Right.
And that's also why we're here for, to learn. And then we blame others, right?
Right. So what happens usually if something like that happens? So it's not because we couldn't decide. It's because
The economy.
Yeah, the economy, the airline company. Why do they raise the price one day before the flight? Why? It wasn't me. Just no space in the flight anymore. What can I do? So we sometimes even enjoy letting time make the decisions for us, because it means I don't have to take responsibility.
Yeah.
I don't have to make the decisions. But something we have to recognize is that part of life, part of living, is to learn how to decide, to learn the art of decision making. If we don't do that, we're not going to improve in that. We think that if we're just going to wait, we're going to improve.
Yep.
There's nothing, I can't think of anything we can improve by just waiting. Maybe the skill of waiting.
That's it.
Skill of waiting in line. But everything else, if you want to improve, you have to take action. You have to.
Yeah, you have to take control of, otherwise you're giving up control of over your own life.
Yes.
And so any decision, any decision is much better than no decision at all.
Yes.
And it's okay to get it wrong, right?
And this is how we improve in the art of decision making. So this is a good place maybe to summarize what we learned today.
Sum about decision making.
Right.
So we have to be intentional about small decisions.
Right, to be attentive about small decisions. Not to be afraid of making mistakes, or at least, even if we are afraid, to overcome the fear of making mistakes.
Don't judge yourself or others too harshly.
Right, because if you judge yourself too harshly, it's going to make it harder to take decisions. And very, very important, to take the time to learn from your mistakes so you don't repeat it, because we're not just saying, oh, mistakes are good. We're saying mistakes are necessary, are part of life, but obviously we want to minimize and reduce the mistakes that we're making. And the only way to do that is by reflecting.
Yeah, and I think it's a great segue to a fashionable topic, karma. And karma has a bad reputation. But in New Acropolis, we love karma. We like karma. And but karma deserves its own episode.
Right.
And our time is running to a close, but we'll learn more about this in our next episode. So thank you very much for joining us today for Win the City Wisdom by New Acropolis Chicago. Feel free to check our website and our social media pages. So it's www.nachicago.org or New Acropolis Chicago at Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also visit us, our location. It's right by the Irving Park Brown Line. Don't forget to check our social media and website to find out more about upcoming events. And please, if you have any comments and if you want us to talk about any other topic, feel free to write an email, newacrochicago@gmail.com. And until next time, thank you very much.